moving on to today's topic, thank you all for joining us. Really excited about the group we have this morning. Really a fantastic trio, our big three, discussing their first 3 years on the job of being an athletic director. All of them are seasoned administrators, so should provide some great perspective on their time in support of ADs and then transitioning and sharing what that felt like. That said, I broke this segmented this talk into kind of three themes: their journey to the ADC, the first 90 days on the job, which some people refer to the first 100 days on the job you're thinking about, and then I'm gonna look for their best advice and looking ahead. As always, you can submit your questions to the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. That said, we're going to hop right into it, and I'd like to introduce our great panel. Dr. Nicki Moore, she's the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Colgate University. Started there in June of 2018. Mike Hill, Director of Athletics at UNC-Charlotte. He began there in 2018 as well. It was introduced in March of that year. And then Tim Duncan is Director of Athletics at the University of New Orleans. And he joined New Orleans in 2019 and actually look forward to hearing some of his experience leading up to the chair because he served as an AD at Division II. That said, if we can just get a brief background from each, and Nicki, we'll start with you. Really, if you can provide the participants when you decided you want to become an AD, and then talk a little bit about your journey to the chair.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's really an honor to get to participate today, and eager to hear from the fellow panelists as well. And for me, I would say that this process was more of a drift than a decision. And for me, the clearer decision was a moment of deciding to prepare to be an AD, just in case I decided I wanted to be, that I'd be ready, and figured that if I prepared to be an AD, I'd still be better at my current job, whatever the current job was. So that was really the decision for me. It feels like I started my career as a student athlete at the University of Missouri way back when, a track and field student athlete. And Joe Castiglione was the athletics director there at the time, and I got to be involved as a student athlete in helping to get a track. We didn't have an outdoor track, and so I didn't know at the time that that's what I was preparing to do. In fact, I ended up getting my master's and PhD in counseling and sports psychology, and actually followed that career path for a while. Became a psychologist, was hired in 2004 at the University of Oklahoma by Joe to be a full-time counseling and sports psychologist there. By virtue of just growing that program, I ended up with administrative experience, and he kind of kept giving me new opportunities, and I kept taking them. And so over the course of 11 years at OU and 4 different positions, I ended up as a senior associate AD in SWA. Then I made the move to the University of North Carolina and worked with Bubba Cunningham as a senior associate AD in SWA for 3 years, and then came here to Colgate. So that's kind of been my path.
Got it. Thanks. Mike?
Thank you, Troy. And I just want to thank everybody for allowing us to participate on this panel. It's great to be here. And Doc, appreciate you including us. This is an awesome forum. Everybody's path is different, right? And certainly mine was different than Nicki's, in that I was not talented enough of an athlete to compete at the Division I level. I was born and raised in a college town. I grew up in Clemson, which makes me sort of a unicorn. There are not many of us who actually lived in the town of Clemson, born and raised, and I did that for my whole youth. And so I really fell in love with college athletics. During my time there growing up, there wasn't a whole lot else to do. And I went to everything as a fan. My father was a professor there at the university, and we went to everything. I was a huge Tigers fan. And so that really motivated me to want to take my passion for sports into a career. And so I can honestly say that when I was in high school, I felt pretty confident that I wanted to pursue a career in collegiate athletics. I can't say for sure that I knew I wanted to be an AD, but that was a possibility even at that age. I went on to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill on an academic scholarship. And during that time had a chance to work in the athletic department. I remember going there as a freshman to try to get a job there and was turned down, and they could not turn me away. I came back every semester until they finally had to hire me, and just used to work in the Smith Center and just loved it. Loved being around it. Loved being around, the great coaches, Dean Smith. I think about, Anson Dorrance. I think about, Mac Brown, his first go around. He was there, which was 100 years ago. But so just around some really special people. John Swafford was the athletics director at the time. So that was a great experience. From there, I had an opportunity upon graduation to work for Raycom Sports, which is based here in Charlotte. They hired me to work for a startup bowl game they had in South Florida at the time called the Blockbuster Bowl for 2.5 years. My ultimate goal, of course, was to get back to a college campus. So I went to Muncie, Indiana, and worked for a year at Ball State under Don Purvis as his administrative assistant with a focus on marketing. And then had an opportunity in 1993 to join the Florida Gators as an entry-level marketing coordinator, and never dreamed for a minute that I would end up spending 24 years of my life in Gainesville, but I did. I had an opportunity to continue to grow and learn and take on additional responsibilities to the point where I really had risen as high as I could at Florida. I was an executive associate AD, and the next step for me was to become an AD, which was a passion and something I wanted to try. And was very fortunate and blessed to have this opportunity here at Charlotte in March of 2018.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mike. Tim?
Yeah, like Dr. Nicki, my I guess career started as a student athlete at Memphis. I grew up in Memphis. That's the only university I wanted to play for. I watched every home game. I went to practices. The coach was a friend of my dad's. They went to high school together. And then my high school coach went to coach at Memphis as an assistant. So I don't know if I was destined to play there, but I was definitely fortunate to play at the place I only wanted to be. Doc Sander was at Memphis back in the day as well. So it's a special place. I wasn't a typical probably college student like most of the folks on this call. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do when I graduated. I graduated on, I think, a Saturday, and then Sunday morning I woke up and had oh shit. I had one of those moments. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a degree in marketing. So I wanted to play a little basketball, and I realized when I played in the USBL that my talent was only worth $250 a week. So I figured that I couldn't make a career on that. So I did everything, man. I worked in warehouses. I worked at collections agency. I sold beepers. I'm dating myself. I sold beepers back in the day. And I decided after 3 years of doing that kind of crap and having a whole bunch of fun living in Houston that I wanted to go to graduate school. So I went to graduate school at Grambling. My brother was a student athlete there. I went to sports administration program. And I got serious because I knew I wanted a career at that point. I wanted to marry my two loves of athletics and marketing, and I got a degree, then I got an internship at Russell Athletic. I did, and after the internship, I was fortunate enough that they offered me a full-time job in sports marketing. I did that for a while, moved over to R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, worked on the Winston brand when it was when it was a NASCAR Winston Cup. So I worked on Winston Cup for 2 years, and I moved in some other brands on Salem and Camel, and got a ton of great sports and event marketing experience. Left R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company with a couple of friends, and we started an event marketing company. And R.J. Reynolds was our first client. We did some work for the Atlanta Falcons, for Dell and Intel, and it was going really well. Moved back to Memphis, bought a franchise, went over to the University of Memphis and talked to Bill Landon. And he was over development there, and asked him, could he help get the message to some donors about me, about coming to support our business. I left away with the job offer and started really part-time in development there. I just wanted to kind of, do something to help bridge the gap of this struggling franchise, but was quickly sucked in and worked there stopped, basically scuttled that franchise, started working there at Memphis for little to nothing, but it was a passion. I was over the former student athletes, the M Club. Got some really great gifts, expanded my portfolio, had some major gift opportunities with student athletes. We had, from like D'Angelo Williams to Penny Hardaway, who was my teammate, to Elliot Perry, there's a lot of NFL guys that were there. So got some great gifts and got an opportunity to move on to UNC Wilmington, where I was associate AD for external. It was over the Seahawk Club, but little did I know it was over the entire external area. So I didn't even start in college athletics until I was 37. So my path is definitely non-traditional. And after UNC Wilmington, in 2.5 years, a search firm reached out to me about Payne College. It's a tiny Division II HBCU, and they needed an athletic director with fundraising experience. And I fit the bill and interviewed and got that job. And one of the reasons I did it, I wanted to try leadership. I had a late start. I started at 37, but by 41, fortunately, I was an AD for the first time at Payne College. I wanted to try leadership on for size, and I figured I'm not risk averse, so I figured I can always go back to be an associate AD somewhere. Little did I know it was a lot more difficult to do that for some people, so I definitely took that for granted. But did that for 3 years, moved over to Clayton State University. I was AD there. It's another Division II. It's in the Atlanta area. I was there for 4 years. It's a larger institution, a lot more professional. It's in the University System of Georgia, so I got to interface with, administrators from 28 other universities here in the state. And by that time, I was starting to get noticed by some of the search firms. I had consistently stayed in touch with them throughout the time, through at CALS, NACDA, NCAA, and I interviewed for a couple of Division I jobs and didn't get them, but I was a finalist and was told by the search firm and the committees on campus that I did an extremely great job. But I didn't get it, so I thought that I would need to get back to Division I. And I spoke to, Daniel Parker, I spoke to Bill Carr, and they said, if you want to be there, you need to get back there. So I was fortunate that Jeff Konya at Northeastern threw me a lifeline and hired me as deputy for external there. And I did that for a year, and several opportunities opened along the way. I'll talk about it later. I made a list of opportunities, and the University of New Orleans was on that list. So when the search firm Eastman Bodine reached out to me about that opportunity, I jumped on it. I was passionate, and I was very aggressive. And I was fortunate that Dr. Nick Lowe, our wonderful president, made me an honest man and brought me on here a year and a half ago.
That was great, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Hey, Mike, Tim talked a little bit about search firms. I'd be curious, and I don't know if a search firm did the UNC search, but I think the group they are omnipresent now and have a lot of great impact. But I think the group and everybody would like to know a little bit about advice in managing them. What's been your experience with them? Tim touched on it a little bit too, so he can fill in. Nicki, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well, but I'll leave it with you, man.
Sure. So I think that, clearly search firms play a major role in these hires now. And it's a part of the pursuit of being an athletics director, is developing those relationships and having relationships with the firm, some of whom were just mentioned, and there's certainly others as well. When I was involved in the search here at Charlotte, Gene DiFilippo and Turnkey handled the search and really did an incredibly good job. It's a very smooth process, very efficient process. You have to understand that there's a tightrope that they walk as well, because of course they're serving a client, which is the institution. At the same time, they want to make sure that they're providing good resource for the candidates as well. And so I think that, outside of searches, it's really important to try to get to know the people who are involved in those organizations, because they're influencers in the process. When I say influencers, I don't mean that they are dictating the people that schools should hire, but clearly they have a hand in the process and an involvement in helping deliver a list of high quality candidates. That's their goal, right? Is to provide the best pool of candidates possible for the client, for the institution. And so, it's sort of like I told our football coach, Coach Hughey, recently, Will Hughey, I said, we find ourselves in the middle of a lifetime crisis right now in this pandemic. and oh, by the way, maybe a once in a generation crisis when it comes to racial justice. And, you know, if you have to manufacture relationships with your players, middle of these crises, they can smell phony a mile away, and you're not going to be able to connect in those moments of crisis. So don't wait for that, right? And I'm sharing this with him not because he needs to develop relationships. It was to reinforce the fact that he's done a phenomenal job of having authentic relationships with our players, and therefore they're navigating this crisis as beautifully as one could hope. So I use that as an analogy for how we all have to be, as for those of you on the call, as as aspiring ADs. You know, don't wait until the searches open up to try to get to know the people in the search firms. They need to they need to know who you are beforehand, so that you're on their radar. And there are a lot of different ways to go about doing that. You know, and it doesn't need to be in a phony way. I mean, let's just be honest here. Like, you're interested in being an AD one day, and they're going to play a part in that process 99% of the time. And so there's value in you developing a relationship with them, so that they know about you, they get to know you, and as they work with institutions, very often they're going to help them develop a list of criteria, what the institution is looking for, and it's not the same at each school. So fit matters a lot, right? Fit matters a lot. And I think that know you as a candidate, when they're developing that pool of candidates for an institution, they'll know if you're a good fit or not for consideration. So I highly recommend that, you know, when you have opportunities to interact with search firms, that you do so. They provide a great value and great service to these universities and do a tremendous job. And there's some really, really good people in that business. And I think about, you know, again, just for example, Gene DiFilippo, who I work with on this search, you know, Gene's a former AD. I can learn a lot from Gene, not just about help me get a job. It's, you know, he's you talk about having gone through the wars now in college athletics. He's been there. So you can learn a lot from these people, not just, oh, what can they do to help you? You know, in terms of getting a job, they can also help you by, you know, maybe providing some of their wisdom from their shared experience.
That's great. So Nicki, both Tim and Mike touched on kind of the fit from the institution you're coming from. I thought it was interesting looking at your bio that you were at 3 big land grant institutions: Missouri, Oklahoma, UNC, but now you're at a small private tucked away in New York. How do you, for our listeners, I mean, how do you think you overcame that big school bias?
Yeah, you know, I think that I'd spent a fair bit of time listening to mentors and other folks in this profession who really had talked a lot about the importance of alignment with presidential leadership, or alignment with whatever leadership, you know, you have, if that's an AD or president. And, you know, once I kind of embraced the idea of potentially being an athletics director, it was more about the opportunity to lead, you know, sort of as Tim described, than it was about where. And then also, you know, looking for that presidential alignment, and also looking for a community and a place that would be good for my family. I have a 12-year-old son. I have 3 older stepsons that are out of the house, but, you know, at the time that I took this job, he was 9. And so, you know, going back to what Mike was saying about really getting to know and letting search firms know who you are over the course of time. You can't cram it. I certainly would not have gotten this job, or even it wasn't even really on my radar had it not been for Daniel Parker. And I had been in a number of searches with Daniel prior to this one. And in fact, was kind of weary at that point. I'd kind of gotten in the sort of the search mode, you know, as that tends to happen. And I'd been in a few, and I was tired, and I'm like, I'm at UNC, and I actually loved it there. It wasn't like I was trying to leave. I just kind of gotten in this revolving door of searches in some ways. And Daniel had reached out and said, you know, why don't you look at this? And I was like, thanks, but no thanks. Didn't know anything about Colgate other than Vicki was here as the athletics director. I grew up in, you know, as I mentioned, in the Midwest in Missouri, and was completely unfamiliar with the whole Northeast private school thing. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, Daniel called back and said, hey, the more we get to know this president, the more we think that this is a really good fit for you. And so would you please just get in the search? And so, and he was like, look, no harm, no foul. If you get in and you don't like it. And that was really important. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. And I'll do it with an open mind. And I'm so glad I did, because this is an incredible place. And it's a wonderful place to lead. The staff here is, we've built a great staff, and there are good, the faculty are amazing. I would never, it was sort of a surprise. And so, I also think that at some point, or pretty earlier than this, in terms of overcoming a big school bias, in some ways, it's like wherever you happen to start, that's kind of the path that you end up going in. Tim talked about having to be really intentional about shifting tracks, going from Division II to Division I. And I actually had applied at one point years ago for a high school AD job, and didn't get it, by the way. And so part of that was, I sort of knew how the big school works. So it has been a learning process for me to learn how the smaller community works. But of course, everything transfers in time, and with an open mind and a will to learn. So I'm really glad that I ended up here.
Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful, beautiful area. Tim, lastly from this segment, all that said, what's your best advice to the group on the best path to become an AD?
Well, obviously mine is somewhat atypical. So I think that, and because of that, I have probably a different view. I think there's any path to be ADs. A lot of people think it's development. I happen to come through development, but a lot of my friends, Dr. Derek Gregg is a very, very good friend of mine. He came through compliance. And I think that you can get there. Anton Goff, who's a good friend, multiple time AD, he came through academics. So I think that you can get there any kind of way. I think that you have to be really, really good at what you do first. So let's assume that people are going to be good at what they do. And then you have to have your brand known. And as my co-panelists have said, you have to, the search firms have to know you in quality. They have to know you are good at what you do and kind of what your aspirations are. So as Daniel did with Nicki, that's an excellent work that he did. He remembered her and pushed her and cajoled her to join the search, and it worked out wonderfully. So I think that's a key part of it, is making sure that you not only know them, but they know you and know quality, because they'll do a 360-degree kind of research on you after they get to know you, and then they'll remember that. And the final thing to remember is these searches are hard. Everyone in the search is going to be talented. They're all similar credentials. It's going to depend on fit. But even when you think you fit, there can be more than one fit. But someone may just, connect in a different way or what have you. So I think these searches are hard. You're going to get frustrated, but this is worth it in the end, I think. I think it's worth it when you finally get a chance to be here and be able to directly impact so many student athletes. So it's definitely tough, but fight the good fight, right?
Awesome. Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, looking back at your first few days in the chair, and Mike, based on your bio, it looks like you got married and then had a big career change. So talk a little bit to the group about how you managed that transition with the mythical work and family life balance.
Mythical, that's a good word, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. We all know in this business, it's the lifestyle, right? You just accept the fact that it's a lifestyle, and if you can accept that, it's an amazing profession to be a part of. But yeah, so my now wife and I at the time were engaged. A fundraiser at the University of Florida, and on the academic side, and of course I was working in athletics there when we got engaged. We had actually scheduled our wedding. We both love the mountains of North Carolina. And so we had scheduled our wedding to be right on the border of North and South Carolina in the mountains at this outdoor chapel for April of 2018. And I was introduced as the athletic director in March of 2018. And so I came up here a month before our wedding, and we had to make a move. I kid her, you know, it took me like my whole career to finally land an AD's job. We got moved to Charlotte, and she found a job in 3 days. So she's far more talented than I am anyway. So that's really no surprise. But so making the move, new job, first time AD. Oh, by the way, wedding. It was a lot, but you know, it was I look back on it, and even though it was like complete chaos, it was one of the best years of my life. I mean, just a dream come true, to be able to, first of all, to move back to the Carolinas after 24 years at UF, which I loved, but it was good to really come home to this area. Again, you know, having grown up in Clemson and gone to Chapel Hill. I had a ton of family in Charlotte. My parents were from Charlotte originally. So, you know, that was exciting for me. I own a home I bought 7 years ago in the mountains in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, which is 45 minutes from Charlotte. You know, it was a lot closer than the 8.5-hour haul from Gainesville when I first bought the home. So there's so much to be excited about, just sort of coming home. And then to get married, you know, within that first month was really special. You know, I'm very lucky too that my wife, her name's Jessica, at one time worked in athletics. So she understands the business. You know, she's been around it. She knew exactly what she was marrying into, you know, which is helpful. And she's, to this day, I mean, she's a great resource for me because she's been in the business. And you know, sometimes, you know, you bring work from home sometimes and talk through some things, and she has a great perspective. But, you know, again, I think work-life balance, you know, is sort of the term everyone's applied to this, is really important. I firmly believe in that. I will say that the first few weeks of the job that I was here, I inherited a staff that had worked for Judy Rose, my predecessor, who was the AD for 28 years. And Judy is an amazing human being, not to mention a trailblazer in college athletics. And I have enormous respect for her. And, but she had a staff who worked with her for a really, really long time, right? And so I'm walking in now as the new AD, and they're accustomed to having worked for someone for a really long time. And one of the things I told them was that I understood and I could relate to that because I had worked at the University of Florida for 20 plus years for Jeremy Foley. And then Jeremy retired, and we hired Scott Strickland to be the AD. And many of us on the staff at Florida had worked for the same guy for a really long time. And I wanted them to be put at ease a little bit because I could relate and understand what they were feeling. And I wanted them to know that they had nothing to worry about. Like they had every opportunity to be able to prove their worth and to show me the talents and skills that I'd already heard about. But the other thing that I told them was how important work-life balance is. For your sanity in this job. We are working nights, we are working weekends. That's what college athletics is about. Games are played on weeknights and weekends, right? But oh, by the way, you still have a full day of work to do as well, right? And so that's just a part of the lifestyle. And but I told them, I said, look, I'm going to be upset if you don't take time off when you can take time off. Like if there's a weekend where you find an opening and you can get out of here, I expect you to do that. If in the summer you're not out of here for a couple, 3 weeks, I'm going to have a problem with that. I'm going to call you out on that because in this business, you have to recharge. If you don't recharge, you will burn out. You will burn out and you will not be effective. You're doing your student athletes and your coaches and your colleagues a favor by taking that time for yourself. And it's hard, and it gets harder the more responsibility that you have to be able to sort of quote unquote disconnect. But you still have to do the best that you can, because if you don't, you're going to suffer the fate that many others have, and that is to get burned out. So I'm a huge proponent of work-life balance, and I'm not a clock watcher. I told our staff, I said, I don't need to know if you're running a few minutes late. I just know I trust you to do your job, right? If you're going to go see your son or daughter in a play in the middle of the day, you go for it. As long as I have a way to reach you if I need to reach you. And if you're not reachable, just let me know you're not reachable. But I encourage you to do those things. I think that tone is super important to set with your staff.
Definitely. Did Nicki, Tim, you have anything you want to add on that?
Well, you know, I think I think it's important about, your family understanding kind of what the deal is, and really coming to, agreements there, and understandings, but also just being aware of those needs, and finding ways of healthfully integrating work and life. I agree that we have to be mindful of just the well-being of our staff, and that's been especially hard right now in COVID. It's just this sort of never-ending sentence with no punctuation of a competition, or even it feels like even a weekend. And so yeah, that's been tough. I'll be honest about that.
That's sure. And I'll just add real briefly that you have to be in alignment with your family, and they have to understand your goals. That was part of what we did. My wife had a much better job than I did when I started at Memphis. She was at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. She's has an MBA and was, basically supporting our family until we got on the road, but until, my career kind of took off. But we talked about that when I started at Memphis, that when I start here, there's going to be probably a lot of mobility. Little I know it'd be 6 moves in, like 13, 14 years, but there's we'd be moving a lot. And are you cool with that? And she was. She was raised in a military family, and I promised that we would look at every job together. So I wouldn't go down the path of a job without talking to her first. And that's what we've done. And that's when we've accepted these jobs, and we've made these moves. And if you're not equally yoked, as my grandmother used to say, then something's going to drop. Something's going to fall. It's either the relationship or the job. And both of those are important to me. So I'm very fortunate to have someone who agrees with that. But yeah, you have to be equally yoked in that way, or else it's going to be problems.
Thanks. Hey, so another thing I wanted to address during the transition, and kind of thinking back on my time, when you go from being a subordinate to a leader in the chair, there are a few moments where you're thinking about yourself, oh, okay, that's why, Jeremy Foley did that, because sometimes we all start to second guess a little bit what's going on above us, because we don't have access to all the information. So Nicki, I'd be curious, and you work for some great ADs as the group has. Can you think back to a moment or you remember a moment early in your days where you're like, oh, okay, that's why Joe did that, and
yeah,
maybe I can even help my staff get to understand that's why I'm doing this.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point. And I certainly remember moments when you're like, oh, I get it. I see more of the landscape now. With every level sort of you go up, you just see more of it. And I remember there were times when I maybe wanted Joe to take like a stronger stand on a social justice issue, or I wanted, more resources for this student athlete, endeavor than we had, or, whatever. And I do recognize that there are, sometimes you have to, you can, from this chair, for example, you can only push so far before you realize that you may push beyond your ability to continue to be effective. At which point you kind of have to accept that that's as far as you can go right now, on something, whether it's, again, a social justice issue or something else. And then you have to sort of live to fight another day. And I would say that's been, figuring out that balance for myself as an athletics director, and having greater empathy both for Bubba and for Joe on some of those kinds of issues has definitely been a characteristic of these first couple of years.
I appreciate that. Politics of the chair. Mike, Tim, anything to share about that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think, we all understand the importance of managing up, but I think I had a new appreciation for how important that is, and knowing that I need to be managed, by the people who I oversee, who report to me. We are dealing with so many things, not just now in the middle of a crisis, but in general in this business as an athletic director, your calendar is super full every day. And a lot of times, you're included or invited to participate in something or speak at something that you may have agreed to weeks ago, months ago. And by the time it rolls around, you don't even remember what the hell it is. You're like, who am I speaking to again? And so, you're like, could somebody brief me on who I'm talking to tomorrow? And so that happens some. And again, our staff here is fantastic, and that doesn't happen frequently. But I have noticed that you really, you need people to sort of take care of you too, to make sure. And I would say the flip side of that is you got to make sure you're doing that for your chancellor or your president, right? If there's something that's athletics related, you don't want them to be, sort of having to try to guess or figure out what they're supposed to be doing. You've got to really serve it up for them so that they can perform in whatever way you need them to do.
Awesome.
Yeah, my president is awesome. I know everyone says that, but I'm 50. My president is 2 days younger than me. His wife was he was a football student athlete at Bucknell. His wife was a volleyball student at Bucknell. She was his teacher's assistant in the engineering program. She is one of the most super talented, smart ladies I've ever met. So I really enjoy being around him. He's smart. So I do my best to try to manage up and keep him in the loop on everything. He likes to text. So we've texted today. We've had a conversation today, just making sure that, the Patriot League, right? He's an awesome leader. But I just try, like everyone here, I ask, how do you like to communicate? When I first take the job, that's a standard question I think most of us ask of our leaders. And he lets me know, and a former president told me, Tim, we don't like to surprise our own side. So the most important thing that we can do is always manage the relationship up, make sure they are in the loop. I've seen ADs who've run their departments like silos, and that's not something that I believe in. So always, any position I make, it's always a recommendation. He has the opportunity to approve or disapprove anything in the university, and my department is no different. So I look at it from that space, that it's his decision. I'll make a recommendation on what I think, and most of the times he goes with it, but there are times that he doesn't, and I don't take it personally because it's his right to manage this entire university, and I get that.
Awesome. So we'll move into kind of more of the advice and looking ahead. And although you guys have been providing some great advice and thoughts and insights, and I'm gonna X out the questions I have noted. We have a bunch of people who have raised their hand and would like to ask a question. So I'll allow them to do that. First one is Daniel McCarthy from the University of South Alabama. Please make sure if you're directing it to someone, let them know. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. And Mike, Nicki, Tim, thanks so much for investing back into us. I guess this question is similar to the one Troy just asked. You all made a move from a position that we all sit in, a deputy, a senior associate, an executive. Now that you've moved one chair over, what were some of the things that you did, thinking back in your previous role? What are some of the skill sets you had a chance to develop that have been very beneficial to you now? As you look back, you think, wow, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I was able to have an experience like that or an opportunity like that that gave you, some better preparation in your current roles.
That's a great question, Daniel. I would say, there's so many skills that you can be developing right now that I look back on my experience at Florida and how they paid dividends for me here almost immediately. One of which is just having the opportunity to be involved in coaching searches. I knew when I was hired here that the first thing I had to do was hire a basketball coach. Like, we had an interim coach who won 1 out of their final 15 games. We're going to make a change, obviously. And so that was not intimidating for me because I had been through multiple searches at Florida. And I also knew that searches rarely go exactly according to plan. And so over the course of the first 18 months, we hired 6 new head coaches. And it wasn't just because I came in and made a bunch of changes. We had some retirements. It was just sort of a confluence of openings. And so, to hire 6 head coaches in 18 months is a busy time. And some of those searches took some interesting turns and twists. But it never set me off my pace because of some really great experiences that I had at Florida that were successful searches or failed searches, right? So you learn so much through failure. You learn so much through mistakes and observing and being a part of those things. And so to me, that was a huge part of it. Certainly sports supervision, I think, is another piece. Learning how to work with coaches, communicate with coaches, help them solve problems, and also be a resource for the student athletes. You know, as a sport administrator, you're trying to sort of serving, you know, two different groups, right? Student athletes may have issues that with a coach, for example, or coaches are trying to solve issues for their team. So that's hugely important. And then I just think that, you know, refining your communication skills, that you cannot learn enough when it comes to the area of learning how to write, learning how to speak, learning how to communicate. Those skills are invaluable, because in the end, what that does is that enables you to relate to other human beings, no matter what your job is. And the better you are at it, the better chance you have at being effective in your role. And certainly as an athletics director, you have to be a strong communicator, in my opinion, in order to be effective.
I'll just add real quickly to that. I think those are really good points. But I would also add experience in working in diversity and inclusion spaces, and doing some of my personal work on sort of my own biases and, you know, what it means to be a white woman in a white supremacist culture. And all of that, I think, has been hugely important in this role. And I think, you know, is a requirement, frankly, right now, and moving forward to be able to optimize, you know, the experience for your student athletes, but also, you know, have a successful staff. The other thing I would say that I've a couple of times been like, I'm so glad I knew about that, was Title IX or Title IX reviews, and just being really familiar with that space. It's just awfully has been it's a filter that is inherent for me, and I'm grateful for that.
Landon Hughey from Wayland Baptist University.
Hello. My question is for Dr. Moore and for Mike. Both of your institutions recently rebranded the athletic department. Can you talk about that process? What went into it? And was that your plan when you were named the athletic director to immediately undertake that?
So we could spend an entire hour on that question, I think, but I'll try to be quick. And it's very fresh because we sort of yesterday literally kind of had the grand rollout of our rebranding process. It's been an 18-month process. Did I know coming in? No, not necessarily. I didn't necessarily know, but I became very quickly aware that the university had rebranded, and it became very apparent very quickly that our athletics brand was not in alignment nor very reflective of the university's brand. And so felt like it was in need of a rebrand. And so, we included whole lot of people in the process, which I think has been really important at each level, of every, from students and student athletes to alumni and donors and everybody in between, staff, faculty, community members. We actually included a couple of panels of children as well, just to get some feedback with some of our ideas. And we worked with a couple of firms actually in the process, and really pleased with how it's turned out. But I'll again can be more specific if you've got anything else more specifically. But I want to Mike, give you some time on this one too.
Thanks, Nicki. Yes, I think you and I can certainly relate to the process and what it's like. It is a very time-consuming process. It's not something that you just instantly decide to do. My background is in marketing and branding in college athletics, and so there's probably a natural propensity to want to just take a look and see what could maybe be improved in that area. But I also was mindful of the fact that that's not always the right way to go. And the marks that we had here at Charlotte that I inherited when I arrived here were solid marks, and they've been in place for almost 20 years. And so, but at the same time, my personal opinion was that they were a little busy and felt dated. And so I felt it was important that we do a brand assessment. I didn't want to just unilaterally make a decision because I was new to a place that I didn't have much history with to say, well, let's go change the logo. Like, that's not up to me. You're a steward and a caretaker of the institution and the program. Your care, your athletes care. It's not just about what you think. So we went through a very similar process to what Nicki described. We started out calling it a brand assessment, and the end result very well could have been that we didn't touch a thing. So we did focus groups, we did surveys with alumni and students and key constituents on campus and student athletes and coaches. And what we learned through the brand assessment was that the power of our brand was not where it needed to be. It was very lukewarm, right? And so at that point, that was our trigger to decide to go ahead and explore some new creative with an agency that we used here in Charlotte. We're very fortunate to be based in a metropolitan area, and had an agency in Luke George Andrews that had some history with our institution. And fortunately, the chief creative officer of Luke George Andrews is a graduate of this institution, and actually one of 3 generations in his family who have been connected to the university. So that was really, really valuable to have that set of eyes on this project. And what we set out to do once we made the decision to come up with new creative was to create something that was simple and clean and easy to reproduce, something that had the ability to be timeless. You don't want to change your marks every 10 years, and also had a connectivity to our city of Charlotte. So those were sort of the goals that we set forth. And, in the end, I think the most key factor for us was that it had to resonate with our student athletes, because if our student athletes didn't like it, then it was going to go in the trash can. We weren't going to change our marks to something that our athletes weren't excited about. And so once we got their thumbs up and our coaches' thumbs up, we rolled it out. Don't always recommend that you roll it out in the middle of a pandemic. It's hard with supply chains and merchandise, et cetera. But, we had already ordered our uniforms from Nike back in February before the pandemic. So there was no stopping it. We had to roll it out this summer, right? And so we paused because at first it felt sort of inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Then we saw a lot of NFL teams rolling out new uniforms. We saw a few other schools launch brands. And then we realized, fans were just kind of hungry for anything that felt good, that was good news about the program. That wasn't about not playing. So we rolled it out and really, really excited about how it's taken root in our community.
Good deal. Thank you. So we have about 15 minutes left in this session. So we're going to take a couple more questions, and then I want to get closing thoughts from each of our panelists. So next on the list is Rick Canter, Longwood.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you to all the panelists for giving us your insight this morning. This question actually goes and blends a little bit with Doc's story in the beginning. How do you balance the insights and opinions of external constituents such as donors in relations to topics such as a polarized political climate and or social justice issues when you're trying to move a department forward, particularly in those first 3 years?
I'd love to take this one.
Go for it, Tim.
I think so coming from the external side, I've learned, and this is just my nature anyway, to build great relationships. So if you build great relationships and those people, their families, what they do in their business, what they kind of stand for, I think you can have honest discourse and you can agree to disagree. I think Jay Billis says this all the time, reasonable minds can disagree. And I believe in that. So I think that our relationship has to be strong enough where we can have conversation, and hopefully their mind is as open as mine to be able to disagree on topics, but to see the other perspective. Earlier this summer, I was stopped by police in Boston before I moved my family down. I was in town for a year. It was in Newton, actually, not Boston. And police pulled up on me, pulled a gun on me, and I fit a profile, right? So I did a video for our student athletes, talked to my president about it first, and it went viral. So over 25,000 people have seen it. And I set out there to say, what's most striking is some of the people that I've known from all of my stops, everyone have messaged, called, text. And I think what resonated with so many people is that it happened to an ordinary person. So usually when you see these stops like George Floyd or Jacob Blake, they immediately find something in their background to knock them down, knock their character down a little bit. And then in some people's mind, it allowed them to say, oh, well, he was a criminal anyway. Even Breonna Taylor, her boyfriend, was a drug dealer. That doesn't, so people look for a way to provide an excuse. And fortunately for me, I don't have that. So it resonated with a lot of people, and people who think a lot differently politically or idealistically still was able to understand how that doesn't happen to white men. It just doesn't happen in the same way, and it affected them differently. So I think it's okay for us to have disagreements. I just want people to understand my perspective, and I do my best, I do my damnedest actually, to listen to them, understand their perspective. And some people want to get to, they look at athletics as a release. We've had donors that say, I'd prefer not to have demonstrations at athletics because I want to just come and release and get away from the real world. Well, some of us don't have the luxury of getting away from the real world. Because the real world, we're judged as soon as we walk into a place. So I definitely understand their perspective. But if our student athletes want to kneel, then we're going to embrace that. If they want to put a patch on their jersey, then we're going to embrace that. How can we deny them? I can't be a leader of a group that wants to do something they're so passionate about and tell them no, because donors who fund us, I get it, they help fund those scholarships. I do understand that. But I couldn't look at myself in the mirror if I didn't embrace them for that. And one other thing, this t-shirt that I'm wearing is a part of what I call Social Justice Friday. I wear a different t-shirt every week just to kind of keep that message and create awareness. I haven't done anything on social and I don't plan to, but our student athletes really resonate with it. I wore a t-shirt to my president's office in one of his meetings, and he said, man, I like that shirt. It's pretty cool. So this morning we did a Zoom. He said, hey, people have to know math to know that one. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's just my way of kind of doing that. And, I wear it, if I meet with donors on Friday, I wear the same thing, and I hope they ask me about it. And if they don't, that's fine. But if they do, it gives me a chance to, educate them a little bit on my perspective. Thanks for asking, Norwood.
I'd love to just add something to that if I could. That's what your video as well, read about it. And just an incredible experience. It's awful. And I think that, for many of us, who are white, we've come to learn and understand that there are experiences that we have never faced, that we will never face, that are excruciating. And when we represent an athletic program, for example, we have 400 student athletes here, and we have a huge percentage of our student athlete population that is Black. And for us to not provide them the support that they need is just, we were on a conference call recently, several weeks ago, with a group, and there was a public relations specialist who was advising us on how to reopen football with fans, okay? And gave us some really good tips, some good advice on what we need to do to sort of frame, safety, et cetera. Well, then someone asked this expert a question about social justice and how we should handle messaging at games. And his advice, and again, this is someone who has tremendous experience in politics and in athletics. His advice was stay away from it. You're going to divide your you're going to divide your fan base. You don't want to do that. People want to go to the games because they want to get away from it. And I had a real problem with that answer. And my answer at the time was that, you're not understanding the people that we represent here. I don't just represent donors. I represent athletes here who are brokenhearted by what they see, students, by coaches and staff who are emotionally disturbed by what's happening, and they need to feel supported. And for us to walk away because this is hard, this is tough, is bullshit. And we're not, that's not how we're going to behave. So what I want to do is engage people right? And we've talked about this, and I know every school probably has a committee that's working on different initiatives, and we have ours here called United in Gold, which stands for Growing Our Leaders in Diversity. It was a name our student athletes came up with. You know, but we've talked a lot about being different, right? It's important to post on social media. It's important for the public to know where you stand, but it's really important to try to impact and affect meaningful change. And what does that look like a year from now? Like a year from now, I want us to look back on what we've done and say, and be able to point to tangible things that we've accomplished here to try to address 400 years of systemic oppression. We're not going to fix it all in 1 year. This committee's work will never end, was the sad truth, right? But we talk about, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a quote that I use, and that's fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And so when you have a fan base that maybe is predominantly white, comes from a different socioeconomic background than your student athletes, you know, if you can find a way to build a bridge so that they can open their hearts and open their ears and understand some of the real fear that our Black brothers and sisters have, it makes a big difference. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with a donor of ours, a major donor of ours 2 weeks ago, white donor, former student athlete here, who was sort of representing a lot of other donors and alumni out of a certain sport, who had some concerns about our football team wearing words on the names of their helmet, back of their helmets, including say their names. And I explained to him, I said, look, you got to understand that, you know, you are coming from a completely different perspective than our student athletes do. And I shared some stories with him. By the end of the 45-minute conversation, he was incredibly supportive of what we were doing. And he took that message back to those donors and those alums to let them know that he was supportive of what we are doing. And he went into the call not so sure. So I just think that, you know, that's the ultimate goal here, right? Is to try to unite people and help them understand instead of focusing on the things that divide us.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so we have just about 7 minutes left. So really want to take the time to thank our panelists, thank those for the great questions, but also give our panelists, I guess, one last minute to provide their closing thoughts, best advice for the group in front of us. So, Mike, we'll start with you.
I'll be brief because I just went on a soap there. Sorry about that, but I'm passionate about it. You know, I would just say this, like, again, we've all been in your chairs, and everybody's path is different, right? So, you know, it was awesome to hear Tim and Nicki's stories today, and just to see, and everybody on the call has a different path. So don't feel like you're on the clock, right? I mean, your path is your path. Focus on doing your job, the current job that you have, to the best of your ability. That is going to be a huge part of you taking the next step in your career. If you get so distracted on what's the next job and getting caught up in, you know, looking elsewhere, you're going to end up taking your eye off the ball on the job that you have. So continue to work hard, do what you do well in your role, and good things will happen. The other thing I would say is don't get discouraged. You're going to be in several searches in all likelihood before you land the job that you want. And it will happen one day for you. You know, it didn't happen for me till I was 49 years old. You know, I was dumb enough to think when I was in college that I'd be an AD by the age of 40. It took 9 years longer than I thought. That's okay. That's okay. Right. So the one thing I can guarantee is if you give up, you'll never be an AD. Right. So don't give up and you'll have a shot.
Nicki?
Sure. Great thoughts, Mike. And I've actually started keeping a list of the number of searches that I was in and didn't succeed in. And you know, I'll tell you what, I don't think it was that I couldn't do the job years ago. I think that I had to recognize that I wasn't very good at the interview process, the search process. I just wasn't good at it. And so I am a big proponent of hiring coaches. Hiring your own coaches and executive coaches, that sort of thing, to help you with the things that you need to get better at. You know, just this summer, I hired a coach, a diversity coach for myself, and with the thought that, you know, why not? I can get better in this area, and why not be able to tap into the expertise of someone who's further along the path than I am. And so I guess the last thing that I would just say is that, uh, when not only do your job that you're doing right now not well but great, and then also kind of peek out above the sort of the edges of what your job is right now, and see how your unique talents and skill set can contribute to someone else in your division, in your conference, on the national scale. Raise your hand to get involved with committee work. It doesn't sound sexy, but it's a great networking opportunity, and our profession needs really good people who care about what we're about this profession, and are contributing in those ways. So those are, I guess, some closing thoughts. And then the final thing what I would say is just a phrase that has been so useful for me in these last 6-7 months has been accept and adjust. A lot of things can frustrate you. You can always sort of be at the end of your rope, but if you kind of look and accept what the situation is, what their limitations are, and then adjust to continue to sort of stay focused on your mission, stay focused on your goal. There's always a way to sort of chip away at your mission, your broader mission and goal, even within those limitations. So there you have it. And thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I will close. I'm a member of the Black AD Alliance, and it is really awesome. It's 55 Black ADs, male and female, who get together weekly to try to become an advocacy group. We want to be the women leaders for Black administrators. I'm a big fan of Patty. She's a good friend. I'm a member of Women Leaders, an individual member and a university member, but that's what we want to be. So the other night, we were just talking about this. I'm on the pipeline task force, and Martin Jarman was on the call. And obviously, he's been at 2 Power Fives now at 40 years old. So he's a stud. He's a great dude, a great member of Kappa Alpha Psi, my fraternity as well. But the thing that he said that was so critical, when we get feedback from search firms or the search committees, they normally tell you, you did great, it was a better fit. At least that's what they told me. Tim, you did great, you were awesome, there's nothing else that you could have done, they just picked. So that's not really great feedback that you can act off of. So he said that he started asking the search firms or whomever he connected with on campus, whether it be the chair of the committee, the FAR, or whomever, what are 1 or 2 things that I did well? What are 1 or 2 things that I can do better? And then when he asked the question to them in that way, they gave him actionable information that he was able to improve his game. So I would leave that with folks today, because you're going to be in a lot of searches, and you may be the unicorn who was hired on your first search, but more than likely you won't. And make sure that you get actionable intelligence that you can use from there. And then the thing that I'll leave you with is we're here to serve our student athletes. I was a student athlete. I spoke to my athletic director only about basketball. That was it. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the type of athletic director that I can write a letter of recommendation based on personal knowledge of that student. And that's why I'm here. And we need all of our administrators to make sure they remember that. And that will help us with these social justice conversations. Just like Mike said, I thought it was awesome. And Nicki, who's continuing to improve herself. If you believe in your student athletes and you're there to serve them, then there's nothing, you can't go wrong with having those type of conversations. It'll be difficult, but you're doing it from the great place, because they are why we are here. They literally pay our salaries, the whole 9. And our job is to help make their experience best. And right now, the experience for a lot of our population of women and student athletes of color aren't the best. So it's our job to fix it and to do better with it. And that's my challenge to everyone on this, everyone who's attending this.
Nicki, Mike, Tim, tremendous, really fantastic. Really thank you for your great thoughts, your great insights, willingness to be candid about your stories. I know that will go a long way in helping the participants. So unfortunately, we can't take any more of your time, although we'd love to. And we're going to close this session out. So thank you again for your time, and hope you 3 have a great weekend.